All right, whoa, that's loud. Episode 99 already. Freaking crazy. I forget, I actually heard this on a podcast a few months ago that was like, that 90-something plus percent of people actually never get past, I think, like 5 or 15 episodes. So look at us being part of the top percent per usual. Who knows if anybody's even listening to this and I'm just talking to myself up in this creepy attic space. No, I'm kidding. I appreciate all you guys that are listening, that are consistent with it, that want to hear some shit about mindset, health, and fitness. And today I want to talk about, I don't even know if this is necessarily a health-related topic. This is kind of more of a perspective in life. And this week it's been kind of really relevant in my head. So I was like, you know what? I'm making that this week's podcast. This might be a 5-minute thing. This might be a 15-minute thing. I have no idea. But the concept that, do you find yourself stepping over dollars for pennies, right? Do you find yourself being very busy and very unproductive, right? And this is something I've been thinking about this week, just with some interactions with people. And this is something that, like, the farther down the rabbit hole, once I initially thought about this, that I went, you see this a lot, right? It's like, there's so many people that are very busy. There's so many people that are choosing to focus on the small things instead of the big things that really move the needle the most, and find themselves worn out, find themselves not seeing any progress or results because we're choosing to not do the right thing, right? So if I were to kind of give you guys a relation towards like nutrition, and I probably think out of all the things I was thinking about outside of life, like in as regards to health and fitness, I see this the most in nutrition. Nutrition in my industry, and just my industry in general, comes with a lot of like fancy nuances, right? And I think the one thing about social media, and social media, just like everything else in life, has, there's context to it. There's a lot of good that comes from it. There's a lot of bad that comes from it. And with an overstimulation of information and anybody being able to be anybody they want on the internet and saying whatever the fuck they want, comes with a downside of obviously getting a lot of bad information, or this kind of dogmatic point of view on most kind of systems or tools or approaches, right? And I think about diets and nutrition and supplements kind of being all in that same bucket. So when I say like this whole concept of stepping over dollars for pennies, my biggest thing as I've matured in the industry is I started to kind of come back towards what are the parallels, right? Versus I was that guy for such a long time, and I still catch myself doing that when anything new comes out, new and shiny, right? That I'm like, oh, this is the best thing, right? Fasting's the best thing. Intermittent fasting's the greatest way. Oh, keto is great, all right? Or like, hey, this supplement's going to do this really, really well for me. And when I was younger, I was like that with supplements for a long time, right? I would say probably the first like 3 to 4, maybe even 3 to 5 years, I was always just nerding out and like, well, this supplement's going to do this for me. And I see a lot of people do this in diets, right? They're always, focusing on these little nuances and these little things that, make it feel like they're doing something. But at the end of the day, it's not really the big thing that's going to be moving the needle. It's not that thing that's going to cause or create the most productivity out of the action that you're doing. So when you think about the parallels in diet, it's like, okay, yeah, like we all talked about, it's like eating whole foods, cool, right? Maybe stopping when you're 80% full, prioritizing protein, prioritizing produce. Those are the things that all diets that successfully work for people have in common, right? Eat in moderation, right? Eat when the sun's out, like do whatever you got to do, right? All the other nuances inside of it between like, hey, am I using fasting protocols? I'm going to do a 5-2 split with 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. I'm going to do carb cycling where I do 2 high days a week, and I'm going to do the rest low, maybe 1 medium. Like all that stuff tries to like overcomplicate a lot of things. And this is where I think a lot of people just get so lost in the sauce. They try to convince themselves that you're doing a lot, but you're getting very little results, right? Supplements are probably the easiest way to fall in the trap, because I think out of all things in the world that you can buy, so many things you probably don't even know what the fuck they are, supplements are probably the top of the food chain for that one. You go to a Vitamin Shop or a GNC or go on Amazon, you look at workout supplements or pre-workout or intra-workout or protein powders or whatever pill you can pop. Even for the people that are selling a more whole food approach to supplements, it's very, very easy to get lost in this rabbit hole. And it's also very easy to start spending hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars a month on supplements, right? And that goes for hair health, skin care, workouts, health, longevity, sleep, stress, digestive, multivitamin, all these things. And most of it is garbage. Almost all of it is garbage, right? And what I mean by garbage is not maybe necessarily in the aspect that it's bad for you, but the amount of money that you're spending for the little change you're getting out of your body is negligible, right? So we want to really focus on in life, like, what are the things that I can do? What are like the 2, 3, 4 things that I can do that are going to move the needle the most aggressively, right? And that comes back to just those foundational pieces. And that's kind of like a nutrition and diet piece, right? When you think about training, and I think about this as the same thing, as a lot of us spend time on these isolation drills, or, we spend time on all these fancy mobility programs, or these, cycles that we're just getting involved in. And for most people that are brand new, you just got to do big lifts at a moderate rep range and progressively overload them and repeat it for a couple months, and then maybe switch up the program a little bit. Like, if you look at the basics are the thing that drive the growth the most, right? Like looking at, the periodization of this programming, or and trust me, out of everyone that nerds out on this, I love this stuff. We're going to do a 2x5 with a 2x2 with a 2-second pause, then a 1-second pause, then a 0-second pause. That sounds like me making fun of myself, because that's what this cycle has involved, right? You can get very fancy with this. And I think where fancy details maybe become more of a need is for someone that's at the higher end of it, that's a little bit more elite. Not to say these are bad, right? Like, I just think if you're doing these things by yourself, like, don't waste all this energy and mind share on trying to create this very extravagant plan. Like, you just got to do the work. And I think about this, like, with business, with, like, sales, or with marketing, or with coaching. And, a lot of times I'll have employees that are just, like, we're focused on these small little details. They're like, well, hey, like, maybe if I drop this hour and move a little bit of, like, a couple sessions here. Like, they're worried about the details, right? They're worried about the icing on the cake. Like, well, focus on the cake. What's the thing that drives that growth the most? So everything that you do inside of your life, right, you have to remember, it doesn't matter if it's a nutrition conversation, doesn't matter if it's a workout conversation, doesn't matter if it's helping you manage stress, it doesn't matter if it's helping you improve sleep. Like, stress and sleep is the same thing, right? How many different meditation or stress tools, or all these, like, little calming effects and teas that you can drink, or sleep tools. Let me tape my nose and tape my mouth, and blackout curtains and red light bulbs. Like, what are the core things that are going to move the needle the most, right? Always just keep asking yourself that, right? And this is where it requires some reevaluation, to always just look at what are the basics, right? And I think the thing that, like, professionals do, and really successful people do really well, is they just master the basics, and they understand that if I do this over a long enough time horizon, I will become good at it, right? Versus thinking that, like, the reason why this person is so successful, or an NFL player that's, starting as better than a high school player besides skills, is because they're doing all these fancy drills, and they have all this cryotherapy, and they have these knee sleeves that heat up, and, have these top of the end trainers. And that's not the case, right? I mean, obviously it's something that they need for their level, but, like, that's a thing that's maybe moving the needle a couple percent, or a tenth of a percent, or 100%. We want to find that thing that's going to jump, right? Had a client, actually, a conversation with my client the other day was, giving me this kind of a whole story around NVIDIA, and where, obviously for some people that are following this story, how NVIDIA stock's been blowing up, and, where has NVIDIA's growth come from? And they do this competition every year where, it's like I don't know if it's a programming competition or what it is, and this is probably out of my space to talk about, but I think it's very relationship to what I'm talking about here. And, all these people would use CPUs, and they would try to recreate this picture. And, like, some of the basically every year they would see, like, this 10th of a percent improvement that beat last year's record. They would go from 74 to 74.5, or then the next year 74.5 or 74.8. Maybe to 72, like, year over year over year. And then one year, one guy made the switch to using a GPU, right, versus a CPU, and he took it from 74 to 92%. And his analogy was like, imagine if I said, hey, you're running a 100-yard dash, and then you drank a Capri Sun, and that Capri Sun suddenly got you to shave 4 seconds off your 40-yard dash. Like, making a 20% jump on the actual output of the result, right? So, like, that's kind of like the core concept of this thing is, like, what's the thing that's going to give us the most change? Not how many things that I need to do to give me a little bit of growth, right? It's not about doing 10 things that give you a tenth of a percent. It's about doing one thing that gives you an extra 5% or 20% or 50% or 2x or 3x. Like, what are the things that just exponentially are so much bigger? Then that's the thing that you really want to focus on, right? So no matter what, like, when coming back to the mindset of how you guys live your life, and this is kind of the concept of this conversation today, is the mindset of what you hold every single day is going to dictate your success. And if you're someone that is consistently busy, if you're someone that's consistently stepping over dollars for pennies, you are always going to be spinning your wheels, working really hard, dealing with burnout, wondering why things don't work, because you're focused on the small little details and the nuances and the context that no one gives a fuck, because you're falling for the trap of me convincing myself that I am busy, I'm doing things. A lot of people have this lie that they tell themselves, or they get to tell others around them, their friends or their family, that they're really busy working on these big things, where I'm working out, I'm doing this new diet, I'm taking this new supplement, when at the end of the day, it's all just something that you've convinced yourself it's a lie, because it's not doing enough for you to be satisfied. And you got to remember that the motivation in life comes from you being productive. The motivation coming from you being progressive, meaning like, I am actually seeing progressive change, right? I'm actually seeing things that like move the needle exponentially, right? And they actually take these big changes. Those are the things that are going to keep you excited. And remember, at the end of the day, it's all the basics. Like my brother-in-law asked me that. He's like, hey, like, you know, like he's a business guy. He's like, so what's next? Like, what's next in the industry? You know, it's like when we're talking about Ben Patrick's ATG and how he's kind of blown up, and, you know, the ATG split squats and all this kind of space that he's kind of got involved to. And there's always these new things popping up, right? And I was telling him, I was like, you know what, that's a really good question. I don't think I've been asked that question in a very long time. And I also don't think I've spent that much time thinking about what's next in the industry, right? And one thing that I was telling him is like, what's changed for me the most is this idea that like less is more and the basics are everything. And it's more about providing people structure and accountability than it is the knowledge and the fancy tools. And when I was young in my industry, it was always these like things to make me sound smart, right? Or things that were brand new that it has to be working. It's like, if we've known through data, right? And I always like to look backwards versus forwards sometimes, and more times I think, because I want to learn from what happened before. Like, why did that not work? Why did that not last? Why is that still working? Why did, you know, the propaganda and the marketing try to straight? Like, what are the details behind those things? And then, okay, obviously now moving forward and then to the present day, most importantly, what are the things that I need to do to be able to drive as much health, happiness, prosperity, success, and things that I do in my life? And it's just like, it's all the basics. It's all the basics again, right? And a lot of times I think people are looking for this magic pill, and you are looking for me to sit here on this microphone, look you in the camera in the eyes, and tell you that this is the thing that's going to help you do it. This is the magic pill. And the answer is the magic pill is in the work. The magic pill is in the basics. And the more times that you can think about, I just have to do this thing repetitively over a very, very long period of time. Like when you expand your time horizon, right? Like me and Kurt were talking about this after class. Is like, you know, the ultra successful people, ultra wealthy, they don't think in days and months, right? They think in decades and generations, right? Like they think in a very, very different lens. And when you can choose to look at the macro and you can choose to look at what's the thing that drives that, that's it. Like just focus on that shit, right? And stop getting lost in trying to find the excuse of you being lazy or unmotivated or unaccountable, and start figuring out ways to build systems and structures for you to allow to sustain that, right? Because you just have to get used to the work. And this is why, for me, I've kind of gotten away from setting big goals or setting goals all the time. It's just like, just keep working. Just fall in love with the work and don't stress out about the work working or not working. It's just like, just keep working and make these little fine-tuned adjustments along the way, and just keep doing the basics. Keep repeating yourselves. Keep doing the same action. You know, this is something I was saying in a leadership meeting this weekend, or on Monday, I mean. It was like, you know, one of the things that coaching and managing and parenting all have in common that make you really good at it is like the ability to just constantly repeat yourself. You know, when I first got into it, my job was like, or my understanding of my job was like, if I'm really good, I shouldn't have to repeat myself to my client all the time. And that's just not the case. Right? Like, I have to repeat myself to my employees all the time. I have to repeat myself to my clients all the time. And I'm going to have to repeat myself to my kids in the future all the time, right? Like, it's just how it's part of the job. So when you understand that, like, okay, it's not about me doing something to achieve it, then just figure out what's next. It's just like, that thing is the thing. And just make that thing the one thing. That's the only thing that you focus on, right? And then just focus on the high productive things, the high value items. Like, don't waste your time with the small shit. Stop getting shiny object syndrome and moving on from thing to thing to thing. This is where I think people move from jobs to jobs. People move from relationships to relationships. People go from gyms to gyms, from diets to diets. Like, people are always jumping from the next thing to the next thing, thinking that the next thing is the thing. The grass is always greener. Remember this, the grass is always green where you choose to fucking water it. So if you really want to have more productivity and success with anything you're doing in your life, focus on the basics, focus on repetition, and then just fall in love with the work, because the work moves the needle. The action drives everything. And if you just remember that, then you'll stop stressing about oh, this little thing. Fuck all that stuff. Focus on the big stuff. Focus on the basics. Keep doing it. All right, guys. That's all I wanted to vent today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Next week is episode 100. Me and Evan, we're talking about this. We need to figure out something big. I don't know what I'm going to do different. I don't know what it is. But if you guys have ideas, send us DMs on Instagram or send us something so we have some topics. But I need to actually do some, sit down planning and figure out what are we going to do for the big 100. Looking forward to it. See you guys.